Good morning. I'm glad you found time to be with us this morning. Thank you so much. Here are the latest headlines from across the continent of Africa. The Daily Nation from Kenya wanted sponsors of Kenyatta farm attack. See nothing, say nothing. Allowed silence from the government yesterday greeted the brazen invasion of a property belonging to the family of a former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, as the Nation established, that is this newspaper, established that the raid was planned and funded by 3 politicians and executed by a well-known gang for hire. Will Inspector General of Police Japhet Koome bring the culprits along with sponsors of violence and looting during Azimio protests to book? That is the big question being posed by the Daily Nation. You'll find that story on page 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, 6 and 7 on the Daily Nation. Equity shareholders set for 15 billion Kenya shillings windfall. The bank recorded 15% rise in profits in 2022. The story is on the business page on page 11. 800 tycoons drop off dollar, billionaires list slow growth, weakened currency blamed. That story is on the back page. And keep off new offices, CAS has told as court decides a fate. Very well, the Standard newspaper. Portrait of anarchy, President Ruto condemns impunity, says police operationally independent. Azimio leaders blame president for Monday's chaos. IG Koome concerned, they put that in quotes, over violence, assures country is safe. DPP Haji orders IG to investigate planners and financiers of the mayhem. And Kenya Kwanza leaders claim Azimio sponsored Kenyatta farm attack to win sympathy. That story is on page 4, 5, 6, 7 and 14 on the Standard. And Gachagua 69 hours at the helm. For the last 2 days, DP Rigathi Gachagua has woken up as the highest authority in the land, with his boss away in Europe. That story is on page 6. And blame it all on Ruto, says Raila. Also, that is there. And 7 killed as floods sweep away property, as well as equity hits 15 billion record dividend, and Kipchoge trains eyes on Burston. I'll try to bring us the details of that on page 48. The Star newspaper, Kenyatta family meets, plots invasion response. Ruto condemns protest, says he won't allow impunity to be part of the country's discourse. The story is on page 4 and 5, and of course the main pictorial is Raila tours Uhuru's Northlands property, assesses damage. He leads the Azimio Brigade when they visited that property of the Kenyatta's family in Northlands. Rains to reduce but will return heavily after 2 weeks. That is according to the meteorological department here. In Kenya, road noise makes blood pressure rise. I can agree with that. That is according to studies. A lot of noise. Those people who are used to boarding these public service vehicles with loud noises, or having so much noises in your house and in your cars, you're being told, or visiting these noisy places. I don't know where you hang out, but if at all you go to such places, just know that if you're having issues with your blood pressure, that will make it worse for you. So that is according to research. Equity Bank's net profit grows to historic 46 billion Kenya shillings. That is also there on the front page. And then former MP Pavel Oimeke jailed for 3 years over 200,000 Kenya shillings bribe. Okay, so let's look at some newspapers also from across the region. The Daily News from Tanzania. Karibu Tanzania, what Harry's visit means for investment and business. All right, and the Citizen also from Tanzania, how new crop insurance plan will benefit farmers. Like every time I hear news from Tanzania, I'm just elated. I'm happy over what is happening over there. It's just a lot of developmental and things that are ongoing. It's just not so much politics, so it's a good thing. East Africa loses opportunities to turn waste into money, and revealed likely impact of Kamala Harris's visit. It has been outlined there. The Nation from Nigeria, Buhari Tinubu well placed to perform as president. That is what the outgoing President Buhari is saying, that Tinubu is well placed to perform as president. Did I not hear that he's out of the country? He went to Paris and also I think to London. There are some rumors that he must have gone to seek for treatment. But according to his team, he went to take some rest because the campaign season was very grueling and he's very tired. And, questions have been raised about his health status. It seems to be sometimes when he talks, he's very slurry sometimes, takes his time and not very well coordinated. His not very well coordinated. I think, let me just use that. I don't want to use a medical term because it may not be true. So there has been some questions that has been raised over his ability to lead Nigeria. So he was out of the country. I don't know if he's back. And as I said, there were rumors that he might have gone to seek for treatment, but according to his team, he went to get some very much deserved rest. So maybe we shall just go with that because of the tedious campaign season. So London and Paris, so that is where he visited. So I don't know if he's already back in the country. I'm not sure, but President Buhari is telling you that not to worry, he is the best placed to perform as president. So, okay. The Daily Trust from Nigeria. 1 year after attack, full service yet to resume. How security operatives averted another attack. Train lacks central lock, poses new security risk. This is the remember the train attack that happened that was derailed by these kidnappers last year. So it's been 1 year later, and the train services are yet to resume in some areas. And I don't know if there's anything much that have been done to address any possible risk of another attack. And so apparently the train lacks central lock, and this poses a new security challenge. This according to the sources. And deploy more technology. That is what the victims of this attack last year are employing the government to do. And still on the Daily Trust, the PDP crisis, how NWC sacked IU despite resistance. NNPC to raise crude reserve to 50 billion barrels. Explodes Nasarawa oil field. Okay, so Lassa fever kills 142 persons in 23 states in 11 weeks. That is also on the front page. I think that's a very important information. So, okay, the Daily News from Zimbabwe. Chigumba repels bid to delay polls, says courts cannot stop proclamation of elections. What is going on in Zimbabwe? Are they planning to postpone the polls, or what is ongoing? I think I'll get the details of that, and maybe I'll update us much later. The Newsday from Zimbabwe as well. Shadowy group runs ZANU-PF polls. Okay, shadowy groups. The Sun from Namibia. Salaries gobble up to 80% of education budget. That's not good. And then the Namibian as well, from Namibia, police investigate themselves over Namco arrest. I guess that's a good thing. And Amnesty International raises concerns about police brutality in Namibia. And the New Times, that is from Rwanda. Global travel tourism boss talks preps ahead of summit in Kigali. The summit is the biggest travel and tourism event of the calendar globally. The story is on page 3, and leadership is about being painstaking. That is what Kagame is quoted as saying. Daily Monitor from Uganda. NSSF law starts biting employers. All right, that is what we have on the headline there. The Guardian from the UK. Guardian owner apologizes for founders' links to slavery. And Britain is strikingly unprepared for climate crisis impact. The Daily Telegraph from the UK as well. Petrol car ban in chaos after EU clampdown. Landlords blocked from renting if homes fail net zero test. And King will dine with cousins on Germany visit. Okay. The Daily Mail. Migrants to be housed on cruise ships and barges. Ministers to unveil plans to end hotel fires. That's costing millions. Okay. And newspaper, Lineker 1, Taxman 0. The details are down there. And the Metro, colors NHS trust run like mafia. And then the Daily Mirror. It is lovely to embrace David's daughter into our family. She reveals shock and support after the star's discovery. Did someone discover that, they had relatives that they were not aware of? I don't know. It appears that is what that story is suggesting there. So you can grab your copy of any of those newspapers. And nowadays, I think the internet has made it so easy. You can just go to online and find the online versions and get to find the details of some of the stories that have brought to your attention. And let's look at some sports news now. As has been covered on our daily newspapers here in Kenya and the Standard newspaper back page, why Kipchoge is not about to slow down. World marathon record holder has set his sights on another record as he trains for Boston. 38-year-old, yesterday there's another paper that says he was 39, so today I see he's 38. Okay, so let's just read what they've written. The 38-year-old faces strong field that has defending champion Evans Chebet, Benson Kipruto, and two-time winner Leslie Desisa. 20 days from today, marathon world record holder Eliud Kipchoge will be lining up in Boston Marathon, and he has trained his sights on setting the fourth boat world marathon major WMMM course record. Kipchoge, a two-time Olympic champion, says he is ready to deliver another good show, with a focus on obliterating Geoffrey Mutai's 2 hours 3 minutes and 1 second record, which has stood since 2011 on the uphill Boston Marathon course. To achieve that dream, Kipchoge is training in a course nicknamed Boston in his Kaptagat base. The high-altitude 40 kilometers Boston uphill course, he says, is preparing him well for the race. In NN running video released on Monday, Kipchoge, who already has Berlin, London, Tokyo, and Chicago titles under his belt, says he is also ready for sudden weather changes at the Monday, April 17th race. All the best to our national treasure there. He is our national treasure, you know. All right, so Conte thanks fans for support. That is on EPL. Antonio Conte has thanked Tottenham's fans for their support and appreciation, while also saying he welcomed those at the club who shared his passion for football. The Italian, who is 53, left by mutual consent on Sunday after 16 months in charge, his exit coming following a furious post-match interview on March 19th on Instagram. Conte said the fans had always given him vocal support. He wrote, "Our journey together has ended. I wish you all the best." Conte called the Spurs players selfish and was stinging in his criticism of the club's culture after his side squandered a 2-goal lead as they drew 3-3 at Southampton before the international break. And may I just remind us, this Tottenham Hotspur, it is the team that South African Tourism Board had put some money aside to support 60% of the money set aside for tourism, branding and all that. They wanted to support this team, so, you know, but I think those plans were thwarted. But that is the team they wanted to support. And Guinea made it 2 wins, cup of 2 in their latest 2013 African Cup of Nations qualifier, bagging maximum points in a 3-2 victory against Ethiopia at the Prince Moulay Abdullah Stadium on Monday night. While the game commenced at a slow pace, Ethiopia settled on the ball and looked to progress high up on the pitch. The home team's high defensive line was exploited in the 4th minute by Naby Keita. I don't know if you have a story here. Yesterday I was telling you that Kenya was going to play Iran. I think they were beat 2-1. They were playing in Tehran. So Kenya team there lost 1. Iran scored 2 in that match. And then the Republic of Ireland made a losing start in Euro 2024 qualifying as Benjamin Pavard's superb second half goal gave France a 1-0 victory in Dublin. Having held the French in a first half of few chances, the Republic fell behind 5 minutes after the restart when Pavard intercepted a Josh Cullen pass and fired past Gavin Bazunu. Ireland put the beaten World Cup finalist under severe pressure late on, but fell short as Migrants' stunning save denied Nathan Collins a late leveller, and Ireland's next qualifiers sees them travel to Greece on June 16. So France did beat stubborn Irish in Dublin also yesterday. And then Ghana fight back to draw in Angola. That is also there. And Belmadi delighted as Algeria book AFCON slot. They called Desert Foxes. They did beat Niger in a Group F tie played in Reds on Monday. Nigeria Super Eagles hit back to beat Guinea-Bissau in Group A encounter. So AFCON qualifying matches and ongoing. And All right, very well. I don't know if my country is even playing there, but they want to play another friendly in Iran. So, Harami stars. Anyway, very well. So I think that is enough sports for this morning. I want to believe that. So let's just look at the weather situation across some major cities from Africa. And we start with Nairobi. Nairobi, the climatic conditions today, it's expected to be mostly cloudy, with highs of 26 degrees Celsius and lows of 16 degrees Celsius. Partly cloudy, that will be the situation in Ghana, with highs of 32 degrees Celsius and lows of 26 degrees Celsius. And it's going to be mostly clear in Dakar, Senegal, with highs of 26 degrees Celsius and lows of 20 degrees Celsius in the temperatures there. And in Abuja, it's going to be sunny with highs of 38 degrees Celsius and lows of 24 degrees Celsius. And then in Kinshasa, they're going to experience temperatures on a high at 31 degrees Celsius, and the lowest temperatures today that is going to be experienced in Kinshasa is at 22 degrees Celsius, and it is expected to be mostly cloudy. In Luanda, highs of 32 degrees Celsius and lows of 25 degrees Celsius, and Luanda, the capital city of Angola, is expected to be mostly cloudy, and I'm assuming with other places there in Angola. And in Khartoum, 36 degrees Celsius on the high side and 20 degrees Celsius on the low, and it is expected to be sunny today. It's a bright and sunny day there in Khartoum. But in Addis Ababa, situation is different, as it is expected to be mostly cloudy with highs of 19 degrees Celsius and lows of 12 degrees Celsius. And Johannesburg, down in South Africa, highs of 23 degrees Celsius and lows of 14 degrees Celsius, and it is going to be partly cloudy today. And that is the latest. It is 20 minutes past 10 a.m. here in Nairobi, and you are now up to date. All right, so whatever your weather, enjoy it. All right, so let's get into the latest news, and we start with some accusations and over a report that was released by Amnesty International. And Amnesty International accused the West of double standards in dealing with crises such as refugees and human rights. In its annual report released on Tuesday, the NGO accused the West of being soft in their approach to human rights in countries such as Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And I'll just read I'll quote one of the senior research and policy advisor at Amnesty International, Philip Luth, and what he said. European states, among others, exhibited double standards as well, because while condemning Russia, they condoned or were complicit in grave violations by their allies Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel, among others. Amnesty International also denounced the different approach taken by Western countries towards Ukrainian refugees and those from Syria and Afghanistan. Like we've been saying this all along. But now, for it to come from Amnesty International, it must be really bad. Now, Amnesty International Italian General Director Iliano Bello added, and I'll quote him, "We did welcome refugees from Ukraine, again rightfully, but we didn't have the same approach towards other refugees and migrants that we often left dying in the Mediterranean Sea, and those will be the refugees from a lot of them from sub-Saharan Africa, from Africa period. According to the report, the year 2022 saw an overall deterioration in civil and political rights, with these sufferings repression in some Western countries such as France, where Agnes Callamard, Amnesty Secretary General, points to the illegal use of force by police and gendarmes against protesters. All right, so this is quite interesting. And let's just start from this against protesters, and then we can go up to some of the things that Amnesty International has pointed out over this double standard. That I talk about it here. I talk about it here every day. I think every other day there is something to do with this double standard that is exhibited by the Western world when it comes to these issues that they strongly believe in, and they champion for. The liberals, strong institutions, democratic practices, human rights records, and the rule of law, and all these things. These are the things they champion. They champion about and they champion for. So they have penalized several players in the international world, system countries and individuals and companies, and they have sanctioned others because of their deficit in some of these values that these Western powers tell us they hold so dearly. So Amnesty International is coming out and saying, oh no, there is a double standard in how you choose to address and look at these matters, depending on what perspective and depending on your interest and depending on which countries and from what areas. So, and how you choose to address this matter. So now, the last part, the illegal use of force. So we have seen how that has been happening in France. We have seen there has been protest. There has been, the retirement age bill or something like that has been sending the French in the streets, and they've been battling. They've been battling with the police, and the police has been using force. And this is one of the things that has made Zimbabwe to be sanctioned. This would be something that, if it was happening here in Kenya, for instance, God forbid, because it is happening in France every day, actually. I'm sure even right now there are protests there happening. So you would see the Western countries sending out travel alerts. You would see that. You would see the Western countries issuing travel alerts. I've not seen the US issuing a travel alert against its citizens who are intending to go to France. And yet these protests have been bloody. These protests it has been a running battles between the police and the protesters, as we have seen in other countries. But if this was happening in Africa, if this was happening in a country here in the continent, even in Kenya or Uganda or Tanzania, South Africa, Nigeria, or any country, you would have seen the US, you would have seen Britain, you would have seen the European Union issuing a travel alert to their citizens not to travel to these countries or not to go to certain cities. We saw during our elections here how the US was very quick to issue these silly travel alerts against, towns or cities in these countries or specific areas in this country. And yet we didn't see this level of violence that now is even being exhibited and we've been seeing playing out in France. We saw the US, UK issue a travel alert in Nigeria last year. We saw them issue one in Tanzania that even shocked me, and I wondered, we just close here. Is there something happening there that we've missed? And the travel alert, in fact, they had to be summoned. The diplomats from these Western powers in Tanzania had to be summoned, and they were told, no, you can't do that. You cannot do that, because when you issue these travel alerts, your people take them very seriously, and they hurt, they hurt our country, they hurt our economy, they disrupt the functions in our country. So you can't do that, and they cause a lot of panic. That is what they never realize when issuing these travel alerts, but they've done that. But you've seen the double standard being exhibited, this protest going on in France, on and on and on. They have been demonstrating. It is within their rights. And I think protests started in France way long. I will not even get into the revolution that really kick-started this protests we keep having in France. It's like embedded in their culture. They protest and then maybe later they'll think about talking. So these protests have been going on. We have not seen. African Union, you're supposed to have issued a statement warning us not to go to France because our lives is in danger. You have not done that, because the European Union already would have done that if this was happening in Kenya. This magnitude of dangerous protesting that has been going on in France, if that was happening in another country, European Union already would have issued a statement. They have not issued a statement. They have not warned their citizens not to go to France. So it is this kind of hypocrisy and double standards that Amnesty International, an organization that is of the West, that is supported by the Western governments, is now saying, no, we see how you move. We see the kind of alerts you issue around the world. We've been watching and we've been monitoring, and what you're saying to you and announcing to the world is that these double standards in dealing with crises across the world, I think, is not okay. So they're sounding the alarm. So Amnesty International accused the West of double standards in dealing with crises such as refugees and human rights, as we have seen. If it was, what can I say? say, maybe South Africa or Nigeria, all right, that was having the refugees who were running to that country for safety and was bundling them on a plane or whatever and taking them to another country, say Niger, to seek for safe asylum, you would have had these people making noise. But Britain is having the refugees who are accessing Britain. And as I was reading through the papers from the UK, you're seeing now, for those who they're still trying to find ways to bring them back to Rwanda, because Britain has an agreement to bring the refugees in Rwanda. They're being held in hotels, and now it's becoming very expensive for the government to even do that. But if it was another country that had this kind of an agreement and a working relation and to repatriate these refugees to another country, and that was a country, say, from Africa, they will be up in arms, and they'll be talking to us about human rights, and they'll be talking to us about, what the United Nations Charter say, conventions say about, refugees. And I think it's very, very clear. I've taken us through here. So whatever Britain is doing is wrong under the UN Convention on Refugees is wrong. You're not supposed to turn somebody else back. Fine, I do understand the argument. They're not taking these people back to their countries where they've come from. But nevertheless, they don't want to have them there until they're bringing them to Rwanda. And in Rwanda, we don't know what really goes on and how these people are and, their status there. So we really don't know. So the UK is essentially, it is violating the UN Convention or Charter on refugees. So this kind of double standards, Amnesty International is saying it is wrong. And in its annual report released on Tuesday, the NGO accused the West of being soft in their approach to human rights in countries such as Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So you can't keep telling us that Zimbabwe has been sanctioned, because we know Zimbabwe has been sanctioned over these issues. That's why I keep referring to it. The same issues, human rights abuses. But their friend Saudi Arabia has been sponsoring, the war that has existed between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And then, so each side has been sponsoring this militant groups, Hezbollah, Houthi rebels, and all that in the Middle East. It's been chaotic, and the kind of damage that Saudi Arabia has done in Yemen is chaotic. But instead, we don't even hear this matter being discussed at the United Nations Security Council. And the reason why you'll never hear Saudi Arabia being accused at the United Nations Security Council is because it's one of the biggest funders of the United Nations. So what Antonio Guterres will do and his team is just look the other side and don't even talk about it. And countries like the US and these other Western allies, they don't even have I'm trying to sanitize my language this morning, but they don't have the courage to point out this obvious inequalities, this obvious violation of international laws, this obvious violations of human rights that goes on, that is being perpetuated by Saudi Arabia in their own countries, in other countries. They don't discuss it. So Amnesty International is saying, this is what you are doing. This is what you're doing when it comes to a country like Saudi Arabia or Egypt, because Egypt has also been accused of committing atrocities. President Al-Sisi, so he went ahead and changed the constitution, and he will be there until many years from now. All right, he served a bit, he still served me because he changed the constitution, the human rights records there. There's no free speech in Egypt. There are no certain freedoms in Egypt. We don't hear them making noise about it. We don't hear that. We don't hear them making noise about what is going on in Rwanda. When I was reading to you that news headline from that newspaper, let me see if I can see it. That newspaper from Rwanda, they have again awarded Rwanda with another international convention event that is meant to be happening in Rwanda. So Global Travel Tourism Board talks preps ahead of summit in Kigali. The summit is the biggest travel tourism ever in the world, being held in Kigali. The other day also, Rwanda was holding the biggest convention organized by FIFA, I was talking to you about. And this is despite of the things that Rwanda has been accused of doing. the allegations that have been leveled against President Paul Kagame and Rwanda in their involvement in the human rights abuses in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So you see, these are some of the things that Amnesty International is saying. You are, double speakers. You are double speakers, and it's quite obvious in how you choose to point out issues depending on what actors are perpetuating these issues around the world. Another problem that they brought up, which I thought to be quite something. Now I'll quote, it's a quote I've read before by Philip Luther, who is the senior research and policy advisor at Amnesty International, and this is what he said. European states, among others, exhibited double standards as well. I'm not even, like we talk about this here, I'm not even surprised, because while condemning Russia, and they have been very quick to condemn Russia, they have been very quick to rally African countries and others across the world to join them in the condemnation of Russia. And Russia, of course, should be condemned because of what it's doing in Ukraine. But the manner in which they have been putting pressure on African countries and other nations around the world to join them in the condemnation of Russia, and yet this person is saying they condoned or were complacent in grave violations by their allies Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel. And this is something that we have to talk about. We've seen the violations that goes on, that are perpetuated by Israel against the Palestinians. Okay, fine, you will argue that Hamas also, that militant group along the Gaza Strip. There are three places that have been attracting this, have been the center of this conflict in that is East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, and what do you call it? I'm forgetting the name. So Hamas operates within, especially the Gaza Strip, and it's a militant group because Palestine is not a state, and so as much as there's some sort of semblance of some central government, but it's really not recognized as a state. So this Hamas is another militant group that has been fighting against Israeli government. So every now and then they also carry out attacks, but it can't be compared with the level of damage that Israel does to this other side, and the level of oppression and the level of things that Israel has done, and yet the West choose to see no evil and look no and see no evil and speak no evil, which is quite unfortunate. If these human rights abuses, and you want us to believe that you have a standard for this, if they're being committed and they're being abused in any part of the world, then the response should be uniform. Whether it's Israel committing these human rights abuses, or it is Zimbabwe committing these human rights abuses, or it is Russia committing these human rights abuses, or Egypt or any other country, then they should be called out using the same language and the same format. But that has not been the case. So Amnesty International is giving examples here. And Amnesty International also denounced the different approach taken by Western countries towards Ukrainian refugees from Syria and Afghanistan, which also has been a very interesting point of, this has been a very interesting way in which these Western powers have dealt with refugees coming from countries that they destroyed. The Western world were part of the people who destroyed Syria. And now Syria is unlivable in parts of Syria. Life is unbearable. You've destroyed the infrastructure, the same way you destroyed Iraq, the same way you destroyed Libya. And now you can't have these refugees come to your country after the destruction of these countries. So what Amnesty International is saying, how the Western countries received the refugees from Ukraine. And I think we saw that play out in plain sight. We saw how the refugees from Ukraine were received in other parts of Europe, were offered, warm welcome, were offered immediate help, housing and all that. And even the citizens of these other European countries were happy to have them. But refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, or sub-Saharan Africa, and a lot of these other countries that the West have done their best in destroying, they are treated so differently. And Amnesty International is underscoring this indifference, and they're saying this is not fair. If a refugee is a refugee is a refugee, despite of where they're coming from, they should be treated and received in the same manner. And what we saw happen, Amnesty International was taking note and is saying, no, that is not the same love that you accorded towards the Ukrainian refugees. It's not the same love that you accord Syria or Afghanistan refugees who are also running away from conflict, and some also from sub-Saharan Africa who are running away from conflict. And so he added that we did welcome refugees from Ukraine. That's what this Amnesty International official is saying, from Italia. And Italy has been at the center of these receiving refugees, especially from sub-Saharan Africa. It's been in the middle of that, the controversy in its response, and how it chooses to treat refugees from certain areas across the world, especially from sub-Saharan Africa. So this person is saying, we did welcome refugees from Ukraine, again, rightfully, but we didn't have the same approach towards other refugees and migrants that we often left dying in the Mediterranean Sea. So obviously that will just be the refugees from Africa. Okay? And yet, they want to force us here to support that war in Ukraine, and yet they won't treat us the same way. That is unfair. That is absolutely unfair, and I'm happy that Amnesty International has released this report, and I'd like to hear their response on this. I really want to hear what they have to say for themselves in this. And so West Africa Sahel region saw mounting violence and rollback in free expression last year. That is also according to this report. Rights group Amnesty International says in its latest annual report. So it covers a varied issues and topics that happen. And so also they looked at that. The Sahel region has seen an increase in violence. That also has seen an increase in this migration that we are seeing towards the Mediterranean. And also Amnesty International say that for Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, 2022 was an especially grim year. The countries saw an uptick in civil killings compared to 2021 as they battled the ongoing jihadi insurgency in the region. Okay? And so they gave even figures. We're talking about 9,000 civilians killed due to the conflict, an increase of 54% compared to 2021. Osman Diallo, Sahel researcher for Amnesty Dakar. So it's just from different regions across the continent. But that double standard that has been pointed out, I think now, because as we talk about it here every day, we've seen it. We see how they play. We see how their response on issues. So I would want to hear what they have to say for themselves, these Western powers and their double standards. And we also see how they've treated the Ethiopian conflict. I think I talk about this every day. The U.S., it temporarily removed Ethiopia during that conflict from countries that will be benefiting from that AGOA agreement. But the U.S. the other day, when Secretary of State was visiting Blinken, he came with, $300 million to Ethiopia. That was money that was being given to Ethiopia. So everything Ethiopia might have lost during that ban, the U.S. has paid it back. So we are just, it is the double standard for me. It is the double speak. Your words do not match your actions. And that is a problem. Your words don't match your actions. And I think that is a big problem there. So I'm happy that it's actually Amnesty International that has brought up this report and has pointed out these inequalities and has pointed out this double speak from the Western powers, and that should tell us something here in the continent and, help us on how to engage with these Western powers, because at the end of the day, they just say things or do things that are in line with their own interest. And so They can't talk to us about democracy. And speaking of democracy, let's just leave that story quickly and run to another story that I went through it yesterday in the afternoon show, but I did not get time to talk about it. So let's just spend about 2 or 3 minutes on this story. The United States is to hold a summit for democracy. See, the double standard. But it is to hold a summit for democracy this week, which will be hosted with leaders from Zambia, Costa Rica, Netherlands, and South Korea. This second edition of the forum that starts today to 30th, today and tomorrow, 29th and 30th, takes place against the backdrop of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Leaders from around the world, including from several African countries, will discuss strengthening democratic institutions, tackling corruption, and defending human rights. It comes hard on the heels of the Second International Forum on Democracy, which took place in the Chinese capital. Now, this is the one that I really wanted us to look at. Yes, China had a conference on democracy. And at first, when I read the headline of this story from some other news network, I said, what? China holding a conference on democracy. This is interesting. But then I went through the story and I thought, it makes sense. It makes sense because the details of that forum on China, that was held by China on democracy was quite interesting. And so politicians, scholars, and experts in various fields from over 100 countries and regions attended that gathering last week in the Chinese capital in Beijing, where they were having the Second International Forum on Democracy. Now, I know you're wondering, China democracy, what it is that they talked about. Well, let me give you the details. It centered around 5 main themes focusing on democracy, sustainable development, innovation, global governance, diversity, and modernization. Participants in this democratic forum, or forum on democracy, said there was no, and I like it, there was no single formula or model for democracy, saying that each country has its own political culture and national needs. And I think that is what China called them there, to tell them, or to open up at least a different alternative talk on how we can look at democracy. Because what the West have been doing is just insisting on this model of democracy, which it does work. With the Western powers, it does work. In some countries that have adopted this kind of democracy, it's working for them and it's fine. But there is no one standard of democracy. So this forum that is being hosted by China is allowing other countries, I think this is very smart of China, to decide on how they want their democracy to look like, okay? And they're saying there is no one yardstick. There is no one yardstick, a democratic model that works across board. It doesn't work like that. There are also other democracies like what we see in China. There are other democracies like what we see in the Middle East. There are other, in most countries in the Middle East, and you see countries that the US have, and its allies have tried to impose these Western democracies. We see how that has backfired. Iraq is one of them. I think Iran is struggling with it, but I think they got it right. But it still works within the context. They have the supreme leader, remember? As much as they do have the president, they have the Ayatollah, the supreme leader. So that is a democracy. That is a structure that works for them. So what this forum held by China is trying to perhaps have other countries express and understand and talk about is that there is no one model for democracy. Obviously, I need to finish quickly and go have breakfast. There is no one model for democracy. If voting and whatever, universal suffrage works for the US, works for the UK, works for Kenya, well, they're still struggling with that. But if, works for other countries, that's fine. But the other countries as well, like that one that has the last monarchy in Africa, is it Lesotho or Eswatini, one of those countries? If that is working for them, then that is fine. If you go to the Middle East and they have kingdoms there, when you walk, you drive around Nairobi and you see the embassy, you see the embassy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the embassy of the Kingdom of Morocco. So if that is what they have and it works well for them, it's fantastic. Jordan, these other countries, it works well. Britain have the monarchy and they still have the other this other democracy. It works for them, and nobody is making noise about the monarchy and why it's even existing in the 21st century. But it works because it works within the confines and within the history and within the culture of the Britons. So this I think this is what I'm thinking. This, because China is very smart, and China has been going round about, in slowly using diplomacy to try to change minds and to influence countries. So while the US is busy holding a forum on democracy to point fingers and to call out leaders and to talk about strengthening democratic institutions and tackling corruption and defending human rights, and how they choose to do that, China is offering another alternative. And it is saying, no, it doesn't have to be like that. We don't have to just have us waste a lot of money in electing leaders every 5 years. We end up burning our countries and we end up causing more harm with these electoral processes that might be very unnecessary and it's just time consuming, and the politics and the campaigns, like, your countries can't afford that. So you'll be interested to know that there are other alternative ways of actually practicing democracy. Okay? And I think this is quite smart. And what they're saying is, and what the participants, the countries that were able to participate in this forum on democracy that was organized by China, they said, bottom line, they agreed there is no one formula or model for democracy, saying that each country has its own political culture and national needs. And I think I totally agree with this. Now, China will continue having this forum, and China will continue selling this alternative democratic approach. It's alternative from what the West has been telling us and insisting we must have. And especially here in the continent, our leaders who are tired of being lectured about corruption and whatnot, I think this is something that might be quite appealing, except we have embraced the Western, well, not embraced fully, but we seem to have embraced the Western type of democracy in a lot of the African countries. So I think it will be very hard to make a turnaround. But over time, I think if China continues with this kind of diplomacy, because that is what it's doing to counter the West and their narratives on democracies and other things. So this is just one of the ways that China is trying to exert its influence over issues of global importance. And China is very strategic, and I think it might succeed on this one. It might succeed on this one if it keeps holding this forum on democracy, and it allows our leaders to have to engage in identifying different models and other alternatives outside of this Western model of democracy that does not work very well. Not will happen. So I want to give way for the next show. So I'll take a short break, and then at top of the hour, Dr. Matsanga shall be coming in with another show, and we shall continue these conversations around Africa. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll see you later at 3 p.m. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.